goes fast, and behold, the third world cometh quickly.
This is America's most advanced spy plane, right? And you heard the tension at first, it's go away, then it's you go. 8 times, Jim said they were threatened while they were on board this flight in English. He's saying it's hard to see it not escalating. I mean, could this escalate?
So there's a tactical issue here and I think a strategic issue. The tactical issue is there's a real risk, right, when you have this kind of confrontation for something bad happening. Yeah. Remember in 2001, a Chinese fighter bumped a U.S. spy plane, creating a multi-day crisis, right? So tactically, you got to worry about something bad happening. Strategically, this is part of a very significant dynamic between China and the United States. China is a rising power. We're a status quo power. We're the big dog on the block in Asia. They want more influence. Are we going to move a little bit? They're going to push. How is that dance going to work out? This is going to be a significant issue for the next president of the United States.
I mean, considering the militarization going on those islands, as Jim said he could see, I mean, the runways, the deep water harbors, and the ambitions that they have to top the U.S. military are significant. One thing, though, that we just heard in that report, there was an American commercial flight in that area, a Delta Airlines flight. The pilot actually got on the radio and said, what's going on here? Got involved in this conversation. I mean, we saw MH17 shot down over Ukraine. There was a plane once shot down over Asia by accident militarily. I mean, this is pretty scary.
Right. And you have to worry, right, that a commercial airline becomes confused for a military aircraft and something bad happens. Absolutely.
I mean, that is what's terrifying. I think now people realize what can happen and how gruesome that can be. I mean, that's a real threat, I think, brings this home to people. There's been heavy criticism from Congress about the U.S. caving to China on this issue. Basically, as you say, the big issue for the next president. But here's what the top Republican and the top Democrat had to say on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee just the other day.
I see no price whatsoever that China is paying for their activities in South and East China Seas. None. Matter of fact, I see the price being us paying a price.
We're not really showing any response to these type of provocative actions other than issuing a press release.
Is the U.S. failing?
So here's what's interesting, right? I saw a study recently of all the times in history when a rising power, in this case China, comes up against a status quo power, in this case the United States. 70% of the times in history, the result has been war. So only 30% of the time has it been worked out.
So the odds are for war.
That's the fundamental issue we're talking about here. That's how important this is.
And you think war is a real risk?
Yes.
You do?
Absolutely.
War between the United States and China?
Yes. And that's not in our interest, right? It is not in their interest. It's not in our interest. It's in our interest to work this out.
For war.
That's the fundamental 30% of the time has it been worked out.
So the odds are for war.
That's the fundamental issue we're talking about here.
For war.
That's the fundamental.
For war.
That's the fundamental issue.
For war.
That's the fundamental issue we're talking about here. 30% of the time has it been worked out.
So the odds are for war.
That's the fundamental issue we're talking about here. That's how important this is.
And you think war is a real risk?
Yes.
You do?
Absolutely.
You do?
Absolutely.
War between the United States and China?
Yes. And that's not in our interest, right? It is not in their interest. It's not in our interest. It's in our interest to work this out, right? But absolutely it's a risk.
Well, as you know, the U.S. very, very provocatively threw one of their most sophisticated submarine warfare and spy planes, the Pacific, over the construction site in the South China Sea. And even more provocatively, purposely brought a CNN news crew along and broadcast internationally this supposedly horrible fact that the Chinese are developing some of the islands under their jurisdiction. I think everybody knows the Philippines has developed some of the islands under their jurisdiction. Vietnam is also rebuilding some islands. So this is nothing that unusual. The point, I think, that has to be made is that the Chinese, like the Russians, are very, very that the United States and their NATO allies are in a war mobilization, preparing for war on Russia, preparing for war on China. There's a general recognition growing that the driving force for this war is the utter collapse of the entire Western banking system. Greece is now ready to default. It's made it very clear. The euro will not survive. Obama here at home has failed through the massive printing of money to reverse the decline in employment, in production, in infrastructure in the United States, and we're now facing a collapse far greater than the 2008 collapse that led to the Lehman Brothers fall down. And the view from London and Washington and New York is we have to go to war. We cannot allow this BRICS alliance between Russia, China, India, and most of Africa and South America, creating new financial institutions to take away our ability to loot the resources in the developing sector. So they're going for war. And in the China case, China knows that every military offensive against them since the time of the British Opium Wars came through the South China Sea. And so their concern, their military concern, as well as their repeated offers to the rest of the Southeast Asian nations to work jointly on the development of the resources, which has been soundly rejected by the Filipinos, who were functioning as absolute puppets of Obama's war plan, and in fact turning their island into a massive U.S. military base if they can get away with it. That this is a situation where China has absolutely no interest in invading any other country. They're interested in their own development, and they're very interested now in working with every other nation on earth, including the United States, as Xi Jinping has offered, to join them and the BRICS nations in reversing the current economic decline and working with them on great infrastructure projects across Asia, Latin America, Africa. And God knows the Americans need that support from China to rebuild our nation, which is in a state of utter economic collapse and a complete collapse of our infrastructure. So there's no reason for this confrontation other than the fact that Obama wants a war, or rather his controllers in London on Wall Street want a war, and Obama will do it if he's not removed from office. The provocation this week, and by the way, it was revealed yesterday that plane that overflew the construction site in the South China Sea flew from Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. So the U.S. is already using the Philippines as a military base for a war. This can be stopped. It must be stopped. But it's going to have to be stopped here in the United States by using the fact that Obama has been exposed on many, many fronts now as a criminal who has to be removed from office by constitutional means in order to end this drive for war, which can only be stopped by basically counterposing the reality of the need for the BRICS nations to be the basis upon which we build a new paradigm for mankind. This is what LaRouche has been fighting for. This is what we now have within our grasp. The removal of Obama has been necessary and legitimate for a long time, but now it's also possible. And we have to act on that very quickly if we're going to prevent this war.
Displaying military strength and showing strategic partnership, China and Russia are launching military drills in the Mediterranean Sea. For the details, let's go live to CCTV's Julia Lyubova in Moscow. Julia.
Well, since 2012, Russia and China have been holding joint Navy drills in the Pacific, and this time the latest drill is actually going to take place in the Mediterranean Sea, and that's the first time that the two countries hold a joint military exercise in that area. 9 warships will take part in this latest drill, and Moscow will be sending 6 of them, which include a missile cruiser called Moskva, also a frigate and 2 large landing ships, and China will be sending in the rest. These drills will continue from 11th of May until the 21st of May, and they will be headed by Navy officials from both Russia and China. Well, both countries, Russia and China, say that the latest Navy drill is not aimed at any third party and has nothing to do with the situation in the region, and say that it is simply to boost military cooperation between Moscow and Beijing.
Julia, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is planning a visit to Russia. What's been the expectation in Moscow?
Well, that's right. John Kerry is expected to visit Russia on 12th of May. He will be visiting the Black Sea resort of Sochi, and there he will hold talks with his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. John Kerry may also be meeting with Vladimir Putin. This hasn't yet been confirmed. Well, Ukraine is likely to dominate their talks, and of course there are many differences between Russia and the U.S. Moscow accuses Washington of meddling in Ukraine, while Washington accuses Moscow of being militarily involved in the east of the country. Well, John Kerry hasn't been in Russia for the past 2 years, and this will be his first visit since the conflict in Ukraine began. So there will be plenty to talk about, and as well as Ukraine, the talks are likely to touch upon Yemen and Syria and Iran as well.
All right, CCTV's Julia Lyubova live for us in Moscow.
According to a senior NATO official, we'll probably be at war this summer. And if we're lucky, it won't be nuclear. Now, this is what was tweeted out by former NSA intelligence analyst John Schindler. And a lot of people are speculating, was he leaked this information in an effort to show the seriousness of what's going on? Schindler is a former U.S. Naval War College lecturer. He's also known to have many high-level military contacts. Now, he didn't really specify in this tweet, but no doubt the reference was almost certainly in relation to the growing tensions between the U.S. and Russia. Earlier this month, NATO launched its biggest ever war game exercise right on Russia's doorstep. Moscow responded by conducting provocative war games in the Mediterranean Sea. And Russia did this in coordination with the Chinese PLA. So this is the first ever naval drill that involved both superpowers. And the U.S. is also, we're getting some rising tensions between the U.S. and China. Now, the Global Times, which is a state media outlet owned by their ruling Communist Party there, has sent out a warning today saying that war is inevitable if Washington doesn't halt its demands that Beijing stop building artificial islands in the South China Sea. The newspaper said, if the United States' bottom line is that China has to halt its activities, then a U.S.-China war is inevitable, and the intensity of the conflict will be higher than what people usually think of as friction. So here we have all of these dire warnings coming out here in just the last few weeks. According to a report from Zero Hedge, a plan might be in the works for a nuclear attack right here on American soil within the next 12 months. Now, this is coming out of the Islamic State magazine. They claim that they are actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, that they have enough money to purchase this nuclear weapon from Pakistan, and it's intended for detonation on American soil. And they talk about how they could smuggle it right into the U.S. via Mexico. Now, this is all in an article posted in the terrorist group's English language online magazine, Dabiq. Now, British photojournalist John Cantley is the author of that article. You'll recall he was a photojournalist that was abducted by ISIS in 2012. He's been held hostage ever since and been seen in a series of their propaganda campaigns. Well, he seems to be leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for anyone who's actually reading this article. He gives a hypothetical play-by-play of just how ISIS might carry out this nuclear attack, saying, well, we might do this and we might do that. It's almost like the villain in a movie that must reveal exactly how their plan is going to be played out to the victim. Of course, this is then used by the hero in the movie to defeat the villain in the end. So is this possibly what Cantley is doing here by pumping out this very clear story of this hypothetical scenario of how they might smuggle in a nuclear weapon into the U.S.? So no doubt intelligence agencies are looking at this very seriously because at the end of the day, they backed ISIS to take down Assad, not America, right? However, such an action in America would actually help with that whole global governance plan because it would usher in a new era of revolutionary change here in the U.S. Just to take a quote out of the Project for a New American Century, it was written in 2000 and it was signed on to by the likes of Jeb Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld. It says, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. So, of course, we've heard that again. And so something like a mushroom cloud hovering above a U.S. city would be something that would usher in this new revolutionary change, of course. So either way, the framework has been set. We're being given warnings by NATO officials. The HSBC is reporting that they're fearing a world recession with no lifeboats left. They say there is absolutely no margin for error as the economy falters. Likewise, Goldman Sachs is warning that the world is drowning in debt. So this poses one of the biggest threats to the global economy. And of course, we reported just 2 weeks ago that billionaire George Soros was cautioning that the planet was heading towards a third world war if China's economy collapsed. So here we have all of this orchestration from the globalists and the banksters warning us war is coming, something's about to happen. And of course, every time we see the U.S. economy deteriorate toward a recession and a possibility of a mushroom cloud in an American city, the S&P 500 limit shoots way up. So we know that this is all orchestrated. And of course, what happens when the governments are on the verge of economic collapse? They go to war. And that's why we're seeing an increased demand for safe rooms. The elite are getting ready. The wealthy are installing their safe rooms. Worried about riots and civil unrest, which, of course, as we know, is being orchestrated behind the scenes to take place this summer as well. So the notion that the elite are making these preparations for mass civil disorder is not a conspiracy theory. This is actually happening. Elites are actually moving to New Zealand. They're moving out of Russia. Billionaires are moving out of Israel. This is happening. They are preparing. Now,
insert keys. Inserted. Rotate on my command. 3, 2, 1. Rotate. 1, 2, 3. Release. I'm getting launch indications. I have missile away light on LFC5. Charlie, 10 missiles. Launch in progress.
When I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. They that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, is not, yet is. Here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, on which the woman sitteth. There are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast.
Missile strikes confirmed. Boston, Philadelphia, Trenton, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Pittsburgh.
These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. And he shall make war with the Lamb, and and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. They that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful. Saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes, and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
Seattle, Portland,